Hi guys, I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. This is the second video of my new power ranking series, this time going over the 31st best team in the NFL, the Arizona Cardinals. Each team in this series is ranked on a specific scale applied to every single team, and with this scale, the Arizona Cardinals did come out in 31st, only ahead of their division rivals, the Los Angeles Rams. So in this video, I'm going over the offense, defense, special teams, and coaching for the Cardinals, and going over how the scale gave them the 31st overall rating out of every team in the NFL. So if you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel, as we still have 30 more teams to power rank. The ratings are already made, but you have to see who comes out at number 1 near the end of the offseason. So before we start, I do have to give a special shout out to that franchise guy. He did inspire this series for me, and he did inspire me to go deep into every team and make a power ranking series. So without further ado, here's why the Arizona Cardinals are the second worst team in the NFL. So before we get too into each positional group, I want to go over a little bit of a summary of the Arizona Cardinals. Their offense came out at a 75.47, which is 18th in the NFL, 8th in the NFC, and 2nd in the NFC West, only behind the 49ers. Their defense came at a 68.82, which is 31st in the league, only ahead of the Los Angeles Rams, which is also 15th in the NFC and 3rd in the NFC West. Special teams also came out in 31st, ahead of the Los Angeles Rams at a 68.42, and the coaching came in at a 74, which I'll explain later is a 4 out of 10. That is tied for 14th in the NFC, which is last and tied with Tampa Bay and Atlanta, and 4th in the NFC West. So given all of these ratings, they came out at a 72.2 overall, which is second to last in the NFL, still second to last in the NFC West because of the Los Angeles Rams. And to split this up for you guys, offense is 30%, defense is 26%, special teams is 16%, and coaching is 28%. But let's get more specific into positional group and start with the best group on this entire team, which is the quarterback room. This does start with Kyler Murray, who a lot of people kind of have a negative on because he is a little bit of a meme. He plays Call of Duty a lot. The contract extension had a film thing on it where he could have had to watch a specific amount of film each day or each week. And a lot of people just like to joke about Kyler Murray and play on his size. But overall, he may have tore his ACL last year, and he may be losing stock for that reason. He's still a good quarterback. Sure, he may not be ready for 2023, but he's still very young. He was selected with the first overall pick just a few years ago, and he was developing every year consistently up until last year, which not only was a setback for injury, he also did have a bit of a struggle in terms of skill and talent. Last season, he had 2,800 total yards, 17 total touchdowns, and 9 turnovers, including 7 interceptions and 2 lost fumbles. He also fumbled 9 times last year, which is pretty concerning, and plus he's supposed to be a mobile quarterback. He wasn't really utilized as that last year. But nonetheless, I'm still expecting a good return out of him when he returns from his ACL tear. As for his backup, I think it's going to end up being Colt McCoy if Kyler Murray isn't ready. But my second favorite quarterback in this quarterback room is Clayton Tune, a rookie out of Houston. I gave Tune a 59 overall. He does pass Colt McCoy, who I have at a 55 overall, and it's a very great late round pickup from Arizona, as you have that positional need there, as well as it's just a good backup, a good developmental piece. If Murray doesn't pan out, you are likely going to draft another quarterback. Tune isn't going to be that starter, but he has a lot to develop. He is a little bit raw, but he fits that prototypical type of NFL quarterback. That's really big for Arizona. He's got good accuracy, he's also got good mobility, and he's very good in the short and medium game. His deep game is going to need immense improvements, though, if he wants to be a starter in the NFL. Those two quarterbacks are the only ones that contributed to the 81.5 rating, but other than that, you got Colt McCoy, you got Jeff Driscoll, and David Blough joined this quarterback room as well. You currently have 5 QBs on the roster, but I'm sure they're only going to keep 3 of them, and those 3 are probably going to be Murray, Tune, and McCoy. McCoy. So that wraps up quarterback. Now let's move on to running back, which received a 70.8 on my scale. Only 3 running backs contribute to the ranking, and it starts with a very solid starter in James Conner, who I gave an 80 overall. He did lose some stock after last season. He's just overall an okay, starting running back or 3-down back, but he's got extreme red zone buzz. He's losing that 3-down touch year by year, but he's still really good in the red zone. He was second in rushing touchdowns just 2 years ago, but we are still noting the lack of depth, and he's already 28. We know running backs like to peak early. 80 overall may be Conner's peak in terms of the rest of his career. He was up to about an 83, 84 last year. Did lose a bit of that touch this year. And 28 is a little bit old for a running back in terms of a starting running back. Some people have shut down that narrative, like Latavius Murray, but nonetheless, 28 is still getting a little old. And if he's not a 3-down back, 80 overall may be that peak. Luckily enough, the Cardinals do have a solid receiving back as a backup, but he's still not that great, and that's Corey Clement. He is just a rotational back at best. He hasn't seen more than 200 snaps in one single season since 2018, and he's primarily just that receiving back on 3rd-down situations. He's not really that great running back. He's more of just that halfback receiving back they are likely only going to see on 1st and 3rd downs more than likely. And then behind him, you have Keontae Ingram. He didn't really prove anything last year. He was a rookie out of the 6th round. And it's not like he isn't getting those opportunities. He played over 100 snaps last year, but in those 100 snaps, he did not play well, both receiving and rushing. Behind him, you only have 2 more running backs who did not contribute to this rating, and that's Tyson Williams and Emery DeMercado. I'm not sure if that's how you say his name, but the running backs did receive a 70.8 on the rating scale. Now moving on to wide receiver, which is a 77.52. That's a very solid rating for wide receiver. And of course, it starts with the fact that you have one of the best in the game on your team with DeAndre Hopkins. Arizona had a massive keep here because D-Hop was in heavy trade rumors. Of course, he posted on his Instagram that he returned to Arizona. He is showing up for training camp as well. So those trade rumors are kind of in the dust right now. But nonetheless, something has gotten in the way of his game the last 2 seasons. He's had under 600 snaps, and it's either been injury or that PED suspension that started last year. And he's still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, coming out at an 86 overall rating, but he will be 31 years old by season start. So he's 31. He's kind of lucky to have still a really good 86 overall rating. Beside him, you have Marquise Brown, who he can play on the outside or in the slot. It really depends on how the Cardinals utilize their depth, but nonetheless, I was iffy on this draft trade last year where he went from Baltimore to Arizona, and it took a 1st-round pick to get him, which that 1st-round pick was used on Tyler Linderbaum. And now Linderbaum is becoming one of the better centers in the NFL already. But nonetheless, last year was a very solid debut year for the Cardinals. The most appealing statistics that I saw from him was his really big drop in drop percentage. He now dropped 4.3% of his targets, which is a career low. And he also had the highest slot percentage of his year, playing 35% of snaps in the slot. The Cardinals are now starting to utilize his versatility that wasn't particularly utilized in an offense in Baltimore. I was thinking about putting a breakthrough grade on Marquise Brown, but I decided not to. And then beside him, he might be in the slot, he might be on the outside as Rondale Moore. So Moore, I was iffy on him as a prospect. I had a mid-3rd round grade on him. He ended up going in the late 2nd round, and he did have a very significant drop off from his rookie season, but I still have to keep in mind that he is still very young. He's only played in 2 NFL seasons, so his rating is still at a 72. Moore has heavy potential as a gadget piece. He can play on jet sweeps as well as play outside or in the slot, as I said before. I know Greg Dortch is currently the starting kick and punt returner for the Cardinals, but Greg Dortch is very inexperienced at kick returner, and if he doesn't pan out there, you do have Rondale Moore. After that, Zach Pascal was a very nice pickup for Arizona this year. He is very good injury support for those starting wide receivers. Of course, you have a recovering Rondale Moore, who missed a lot of last year with an injury, and you have DeAndre Hopkins, who is aging. He's going to be more prone to injuries. hopefully we can all hope that doesn't happen to, or another injury doesn't happen to either of them. Pascal is still a very good injury support pickup for Arizona. And speaking of Dortch, you also have Greg Dortch contributing to the rating here as the final wide receiver that contributes. He is the first breakthrough potential on this roster. Now, if you didn't watch my Rams video, I did mention in there that there is at least one breakthrough potential player on each roster. Arizona has 3 on their roster, and it starts with Greg Dortch. So Dortch was very solid when he was filling in for D-Hop last year. He averaged over 8 targets a game from weeks 1 to 3, and he had 4 games last year where he had 10 or more targets. And as I was saying before, Dortch is also a very reliable and good return man who is currently the starting kick returner and punt returner for Arizona. Outside of them, these guys did not contribute to the rating. You have Auden Tate, Michael Wilson, Andre Bacelia, Javon Wims, and Daniel Arias. So the wide receivers get a 77.52, and after that, there is a significant drop-off when going to tight end, which is a 70.7. This tight end room isn't particularly bad. It's got potential for sure. Part of it's aging and part of it's not proven. So this tight end room is a little bit of a flux. But nonetheless, it starts with Zach Ertz. He is turning 33 years old in November. Really not a good sign. And efficiency has been an issue when he's been with Arizona. His blocking has been god-awful almost, as for at least a tight end. With Philly, it was fine, but he went to Arizona, and now he just hasn't been showing that off as much as he should. But that does go without saying. Ertz is still a very reliable tight end 1 in any offense in the NFL. His rating is just going down because he's aging, so he's already down to that 77 that you see on the screen. Now that rating drops 10 to 67 when we get to Trey McBride, and McBride, I was a big fan of him as a prospect. He went tight end 1 off the board in last year's draft in a pretty weak tight end class, except I had a mid-second round grade on him and he went in the late second. He was just not good as a receiver last year. They do like to have that tight end option. Now, particularly their tight ends are better blockers than receivers. We saw Max Williams be their tight end 1 just a couple years ago, but nonetheless, Trey McBride is going to have to improve on his receiving abilities anyways. But still, blocking is still very good, and in some sets, he may be acting as like a 6th offensive lineman on that line. He allowed pressures on only 7.1% of his snaps last year, which is pretty good on paper. Then you have Blake Whiteheart. So Whiteheart is a very good undrafted free agent pickup this year. I had an early 7th round grade on him. He wasn't the best tight end available after the draft, but he was still one of the tight ends available. And he's a good receiving tight end to combat McBride's lack of a good receiving ability. Outside of those 3, the guys who did not contribute to the rating, we have Noah Togai, we have Joel Honigford, Bernhard Seikovitz, and Chris Pierce. And to round out the offense, we got the offensive line. So the offensive line here, there are 8 guys who contribute to the rating, and they got a 71.54. It starts with that left tackle, which is one of the better left tackles in the NFL, and DJ Humphries. So we know what he can do. He had a really good 2020 NFL season, but he hasn't been near that elite since. He allowed 8 sacks and 45 pressures in 2021, and in terms of last year, he had a back injury that kept him to only 575 snaps. And with that being said, he is now reaching his peak. He is 29 years old. I like to say offensive linemen peak around 30 to 31, so this may be the last season we get out of Humphries before he starts to decline in rating. But I keep saying the negatives, and I shouldn't be, because he's still a very efficient left tackle. He doesn't particularly like to allow sacks, and he doesn't receive a lot of penalties, at least in the last couple of years. He's just had a very lackluster last couple of years, and that's not looking good for him as a rating prospect. And now you have the left tackle who you just picked up, Harris Johnson Jr. You guys are likely playing him at left guard. I do like him better at left tackle, but he can still fill in Humphries' void when it gets that far. Harris Johnson Jr. is still a very good left tackle, and I thought the positional pick was fine. I just didn't like the idea that there were 2 better offensive tackles on the board, let alone you could have gotten one of them back at 12 and not traded it up to number 6. Playing him at offensive guard is a fine decision, as he does does have experience on the inside. Nicholas Petit-Frere, who is currently with the Tennessee Titans, was the left tackle for Paris Johnson's early career. When Petit-Frere got drafted and moved away, Paris Johnson came in and became as dominant as we all know and love. But still, I thought the pick was a slight reach. I don't think that he's particularly pro-ready, but nonetheless, he was still my 20th best player on the board. It's not like they reached up super far to get him. And Paris Johnson is easily the best interior offensive lineman that they have. We now got Elijah Wilkinson at center. Froholt is currently the listed starting center for Arizona, but I like Wilkinson here better. I don't think he should be a starter, neither should Froholt on that matter, but he's still a very solid rotational piece in terms of the pickup that they had. They got him from Atlanta. And speaking of Atlanta, Wilkinson was a good pass blocker for them last year, so that's always a good sign. And then in the right guard spot, you have Will Hernandez. He was okay in his first season with Arizona in 2022. He was probably his best season yet. He was not great in New York where he was drafted, but he is still a very powerful pass blocker. Again, pass blocker, a lot of these guys are good at blocking the pass. He will definitely help out with the uncertainty in that QB room, but nonetheless, he does need a bit better discipline. He has 15 penalties in the last 2 seasons. He's going to need to make a big leap on that. And then rounding out that O-line is Kelvin Beachum. He is very much an aging offensive tackle. He will be 34 by the time the season starts, and he may be replaced by Paris some point in the year. I don't like that though. Paris is better at offensive tackle, but he has the most experience at left tackle and not right tackle. But Beachum is still a very solid offensive tackle. He was really good last year, had one of those best years in a while. The last 2 years were really good for him. And age isn't really stopping his development, which is a great sign to see. Cardinals can use him for more longevity. Now, there were 3 other offensive linemen that contributed to the rating, and these guys are just weighted at 10% of the full rating combined. It's Josh Jones is where it starts. I was high on him as a prospect. I had a late second round grade on him, and he did have a really good third year, so he is at a 68 overall. His first 2 years were very kind of like, not great. This last year was actually pretty good. And then I was talking about Froholt earlier. I don't even know how to say his first name, but he is still a possible starter at center. He just hasn't played much. He was drafted in 2019 and has only seen time on the field in 2 of those seasons. He's seen the most of 250 snaps at 1 season, which was last year with Cleveland. I just don't like the idea that he might be starting at center this year. And then there's also Dennis Daly, who is a solid rotational pickup in free agency. I don't see him starting, especially when Josh Jones is probably that 3rd best offensive tackle. I just don't see Dennis Daly getting a lot of time this season. Outside of them, these are the guys who did not contribute though. You have Julian Davenport, Lycidas Smith, John Gaines II, Marquise Hayes, Hayden Howerton, Badar Troyer, and Lachavius Simmons. So that offense gets a 71.54, which rounds out the 18th best offense in the NFL, 8th best offense in the NFC, 2nd best offense in the NFC West, only behind San Francisco. They get a 75.47 on offense, which is not particularly bad, but when you note that the team does have a 72.2 overall, it does go pretty downhill from there. So let's move into defense, which had a 68.82, which is 2nd to last in the NFL, only ahead of their division rivals, the Los Angeles Rams. And it starts with another group, the one that's weighted the most at edge rusher. They had a 68.66, which is pretty low in terms of edge rushing groups. Now, the Rams had their edge rushing group as the worst positional group in the NFL. The Cardinals is not as bad, and it kind of has a very big similarity to the Rams. That similarity is the fact that BJ Ojulari, a rookie, is the best edge rusher on this team. Now, what's very different about this is I did have BJ Ojulari mocked to the Rams. They ended up going with Steve Avila instead, but nonetheless, BJ Ojulari to the Cardinals is still a fantastic pick. I had an A+ draft selection on him. I had an early 2nd round grade on him, which was number 18th overall as a prospect. Along with a heavy need for position, this was an A+. Cardinals fans should expect a very athletic defender who can defend both pass and run, and he has the 2nd breakthrough potential on this roster. That's big because he's a rookie, but given his situation being edge number 1 and the heavy upside that he has as a prospect, it makes sense sense to give him this rating. And then you have Cameron Thomas, who I wasn't high on him as a prospect. I had a late 4th round grade on him going into last year, but he was still fairly solid in 237 snaps that he played last year. All you may need out of him is good pass rushing and good tackling. Both of those he's actually really good at. So if you only utilize those things out of him, that's great. The problem is his run defending instincts need heavy improvements. He was not good in run defense last year, often overshot guys as well. But nonetheless, you're still probably using him as a sole pass rusher if you can, especially when we'll get into this later. You have a lot of good tackling in the linebacker core and in the secondary. You might want to play a more of a contained defense. If you're playing a contained defense, you won't need anything out of Thomas outside of pass rushing. Then we have at the third best is Dennis Gardeck, who he is always going to be a cut candidate for Arizona. He's been sitting at the back of the roster for a while now, but he was elite in 2020. I'm not sure how many of you guys know this, but Dennis Gardeck led the league in highest sack per snap percentage in 2020. He had 7 sacks in only 94 snaps, which is absolutely insane. Since then, he hasn't played more than 200 snaps in one season, and I haven't seen him enough to give him a higher rating than a 63. Upside is through the roof with this kid. And then we have Victor Dimukeje, who I haven't really seen a lot of good out of him. He has been very unimpressive to start his career. He's just an okay rotational piece, but he shouldn't be projected to be the best edge rusher off the bench, at least according to our lads. Outside of those 4 edge rushers, the 2 that you have coming off the bench that did not contribute to the rating is Myjai Sanders, who is apparently, according to our lads, projected to start, and Jesse Luketa. Now moving on to one of the worst positional groups in the entire NFL, and it's the interior defensive linemen for the Arizona Cardinals. They could not receive a 60, which there are only 4 positional groups in the league that did not receive a 60. It starts with the fact that their best rated interior D lineman is a 65 overall, and that is Rashard Lawrence. So I was high on Lawrence as a prospect. I had a mid-3rd round grade on him. He came out of LSU. He came out of the 4th round, and he's been very unimpressive so far, given especially that he's probably the best interior defensive lineman on this roster, and he's going to play the most out of any of those linemen. In 2022, he played a career low 112 snaps, and he's now going into his 4th season on the Arizona Cardinals, hoping that he can stick in there and actually do well as a starting defensive lineman. Also about Lawrence, the run defense upside is there. That's currently what he's best at, and now that he's going to be getting more snaps, he may be really good at defending the run on the inside in a 3 front as a 2-tech. And then you have Carlos Watkins. This is his 7th season in the NFL. He's on his 3rd team now. Watkins isn't great by any means. He is likely going to start, but Watkins is very inconsistent all around. Some games he's really good, some games he's really bad, some games he's atrociously bad, and the run defense that he brings is well below average. And with this next guy, I smack myself in the head because it's LJ Collier. Why did I like this guy as a prospect? I had an early 2nd round grade on him. He went in the late 1st, but of course I only have about at max 20 actual true 1st round grades. And Collier has developed backwards since entering the league. His last 2 seasons have been absolutely god-awful for a 1st rounder, and he just doesn't have one fantastic trait. He stays at a 58 overall because he is only 27 years old. He's going into his 5th season in the NFL. Only 4 seasons ago, he was a 1st round pick, so that's why he's still about at a 58. And then there's Ben Still. They just picked him off waivers from the Cleveland Browns, and this is his 3rd team in 2 seasons, which is expected of an undrafted free agent. He's the 4th best defensive lineman on this team, and he was just an undrafted free agent last year who's barely played. Still played in 60 snaps last year, but he was a really good pass rusher in those 60 snaps. You just haven't seen enough of Still to be able to give him higher than where he's at. And then the last guy who contributed to the rating is Kevin Strong Jr. He's not really a good defensive lineman. He has less than 800 career snaps in 4 seasons, and his run defense is actually like wildly inconsistent. If you go and look at his run defense for the last 4 seasons, some seasons has been fantastic, Other seasons, it's been awful. So I don't know how good of a run defender he is. Pass rusher is consistently just but nonetheless, as an interior defensive lineman, you want to be consistent at run defense, and that's not what Kevin Strong is. Now, the two starters who did not contribute to the rating are Likai Fotu and Jonathan Ledbetter, and outside of them, you have Dante Stills, Jacob Slade, and Eric Banks. Now, the rating gets much better compared to a 59.94 when we get to the linebackers here. Linebackers are in a 70.44, and I don't understand something personally. A lot of people say the Cardinals are obsessed with interior linebackers. If they are, their depth isn't great, nor are their starters, so linebackers should not be this low if they're actually truly obsessed with them. Now, a note before I go through this, Isaiah Simmons is not on this linebacker list. He is currently listed as safety on this depth chart review. He would be tied for the best linebacker in this core. Kaiser White is the one who's tied with them. They're both at a 75 overall. For Kaiser White, he had a very strong campaign in 2022 with the Eagles, and he had a 6th round grade on him coming out of the draft. He's originally from West Virginia. He went in the 4th round, and he's actually impressed me since. Pass rush has seen immense improvements since he came out as a rookie. As time has gone on, he's actually became such a great blitzer, and he just comes in as like that versatile blitzing option for the Cardinals, truly what they do need. And then there's Zaven Collins, who was drafted in the 1st round not too long ago. I had a mid-2nd round grade on him. He came out of Tulsa. The competition wasn't great, and I didn't see too much out of Zaven Collins when I was scouting him, but nonetheless, he really disappointed in his first starting season with Arizona in 2022. It's not like he was god-awful, especially noting that his coverage was actually pretty good, but the run defense was really bad. So on this roster, he is the 3rd of the 3 breakthrough potential guys on the Cardinals. I did give him breakthrough potential because he has shown improvements as a coverage linebacker, and if he can improve on his run defense, he could actually become a top linebacker in the NFL. So this season, I do have a breakthrough grade on Zaven Collins. So the depth at inside linebacker for the Cardinals is mainly rookies, and it starts with Owen Pappoe out of Auburn. Pappoe is one of 2 rookies that contributed to this rating for linebackers. He was taken in the late 5th round. I had a late 4th round grade on him, and it was actually a really good depth pickup for Arizona. Fans should expect great athleticism just like BJ Ojulari, but Pappoe is an athletic freak. He may be just slightly worse than Simmons, and Simmons was a very athletic linebacker coming out of the draft, but you're getting Pappoe in the late 5th round. The value in the 5th round for an athletic freak like him is actually crazy good. And then the 4th best linebacker on this core is their 2nd rookie that contributes to this rating. He was actually undrafted. It was Kyle Soley, and Arizona honestly just killed it with the UDFAs in this draft. But with Kyle Soley, you have a guy who's pretty bad in coverage. Wasn't particularly a fantastic UDFA pickup when mentioning scheme, but as a player, he's a very good tackler. He has great run defense instincts. He's just an all-around really good run defender out of Arizona State. The 5 linebackers who did not contribute to this rating of 70.44 is Ezekiel Turner, Lake Lynch, Chris Barnes, Josh Woods, and Marvin Pierre. Now getting here into cornerbacks, we have a 68.52 rating on them. I don't really know what to think of this cornerback group because this just screams a scheme fit of containing the run. So it starts with Rashad Fenton, who is a very underrated corner in my opinion. He was really good with Kansas City. I don't really know why they let him go, but he's just an elite tackling corner that works against yards after catch. He does allow way too many catches for a cornerback, which is a really big downside, but it may be a good switch to a guy like a box safety or a nickel corner. That trend continues onto the next cornerback with Garrett Williams, the rookie out of Syracuse. I thought this was a really good pickup in the early 3rd round. He got a late 2nd round grade from me, but he's literally the same exact concept as Rashad Fenton. He can move to box safety or the nickelback position because he's an elite tackler who has some deep coverage concerns. He does also have an injury concern, but nonetheless, he's still a very disciplined prospect. Now that I think about this, the Cardinals better be good on the line of scrimmage this year with how many good run defenders they have on this roster. After that, you have Antonio Hamilton, who is another really good disciplined cornerback in this room. Last 2 seasons, he's played 733 snaps, and he's had 3 penalties in those pretty high amount of snaps. What takes him against the group is he's not a great tackler. He's a little bit iffy on terms of play strength. He's not a great press corner, but in terms of deep coverage or downfield coverage, he's actually not too shabby. And then your 6th round selection out of Louisville, Keitrell Clark, was actually a really good selection in this draft. He comes out at cornerback 4. He got a late 4th round grade for me. As I said, he went in the 6th. He's a perfect need-based selection too. You snag a 2nd cornerback in this class. I thought that was a great idea for Arizona. He doesn't really fit the prototypical build of a cornerback though. He's 5'10", 181 pounds, but he still has fantastic ball skills on any wide receiver. He just needs to beat the undersized allegations. That's what's holding him back from being an elite cornerback. It's kind of like Travius Hodges-Tomlinson, who went to the LA Rams, so I just talked about in my last power rankings video. Outside of that though, there are 6 cornerbacks who did not contribute to the rating. It is Marco Wilson, who is projected to start, Nate Hairston, Christian Matthew, Chris Boyd, Kendall Brooks, and Quavion White. Now, to wrap up this defense, we have safeties. So safety gets the best rating of any defensive positional group from the Cardinals, the 3rd best positional group overall, and it is a 75.58. And this is pending big tweaks in case Budda Baker does leave or get traded away. I can tell Arizona does want to keep Budda Baker, but if he does get traded away, you're likely going to have Isaiah Simmons stick to safety this year, and Rashad Fenton or Garrett Williams, one of the two, is likely going to switch over to safety as well. But it starts with Budda Baker. So Budda Baker, he has trade rumors right now because he did request a trade about a month ago. You could get a pretty big haul back for Budda Baker, but you do have to remember that D-Hop was in trade rumors as well. He beat the trade rumors. He came on Instagram. I talked about this earlier. Baker has lost that elite touch. I thought Budda Baker was one of the best safeties in the league. He still is, don't get me wrong, but he's not an elite safety anymore. The last 2 seasons, he doesn't really deserve that safety number 1 money, and he's proven that. So he's still a fantastic tackler and a fantastic run defender as well. Baker, he's still a great safety, don't get me wrong. And then you got Jalen Thompson, who is developing very slowly as a safety, but he's still another very good run defender. He's got great tackling instincts. He missed only 3.5% of tackles last year. That is outstanding. And as I said, the amount of good run defenders that this Cardinals team has should definitely make them really good at the line of scrimmage, or at least you can hope so. But in coverage, Jalen Thompson allowed way too many catches and allowed way too many touchdowns for a safety, and he's best in playing zone coverage with no transitions from person to person. After him, you have Isaiah Simmons, who I was extremely high on this guy as a prospect. He was a top 5 prospect in that draft to me. He got his 5th year option declined, as it probably should be, because Simmons has been god-awful in run defense. He's easily best in coverage, which makes sense why you're switching to safety. I really do support this transition to safety, and you want to fully utilize his great ball skills and mobility, especially for his size. So this is probably his last hurrah when you take into account that his 5th year option was declined. And finally, safety number 4, which only contributed to 10% of the rating, is Javonte Moffitt. I was somewhat high on him as a prospect. He was a 6th round grade to me. He's just a rotational guy. He may play 50 snaps. And even if Budda Baker does leave, you're going to have guys come in at safety from the cornerback room. So Moffitt's probably not going to play a lot. Don't need to say a lot about him. Outside of those 3, there are 3 safeties still left on the roster that did not contribute: Juju Hughes, Josh Thomas, and Andre Chachere. So for defense for the Arizona Cardinals, it comes out at a 68.82, second last in the NFL, only in front of the Los Angeles Rams, who have an atrocious defense. Could be historically bad defense. Of course, they still have Aaron Donald, but outside of him, they don't have a lot more. It's not like they barely topped it either. They kind of blew it out of the water. So Arizona's still 31st best defense in the league. They also have the 31st best special teams in the league, and that comes in at a 68.42. And this special teams was originally dead last until they signed Matt Hack. So I do want to start here with Matt Prater, though. Prater's age is starting to show a little bit. This may be the final season of his career. In 2018, he was with the Lions, so last season was his best season with Arizona, but he's still getting older. He's still only making about 84-ish% of his field goals on average, and he's missing 1 or 2, maybe even 3 extra points a season. And then you got Matt Hack at punter. Matt Hack was actually picked up by the Cardinals in the middle of me prepping for my video for the Los Angeles Rams. That's crazy because I would have said the Los Angeles Rams Rams had the second worst special teams. Instead, they have the worst because of the Matt Hack signing. So with Matt Hack, he hasn't really been a great punter anyways, but it is an upgrade from Nolan Cooney, who was their starter beforehand. He is still a very good, like, inside the 20-yard line punter, but outside of that, he doesn't really get enough distance on his punts. You're gonna probably get only about 40 to 42 yards a punt out of Matt Hack. And I was talking about this earlier, these are bound to change. Your kick returner and punt returner for Arizona is Greg Dortch. He's got breakthrough potential, as I mentioned earlier, especially when you note he's got special teams value, but he's inexperienced with kick returning. He's only has 20 kick returns in 3 seasons. He's not great at kick returning, and we could definitely see someone like Rondale Moore come in here by the start of the season. And in terms of punt returning, Greg Dortch he just does what he needs to do. He's not like extraordinarily good. He's not bad by any means either. He muffed 1 punt in 2022 on 26 returns, and in those 26 returns, he had only 5 fair catches. So on 21 of those 26 punt returns, he returned the punt, and he averaged just under 7 yards per attempt last season with Arizona. So you are going to be seeing someone who does what he needs to do, who's always hungry to get yardage after a punt return. But that's about all there is when we're talking about special teams. So that does give him a 68.42, which is, as I said, second to last in the league, only behind the Los Angeles Rams. It's still not good, and it doesn't get any better. Coaching is next, and I don't want to keep you guys too long for the coaching, but it only got a 4 out of 10. There are 5 teams that got either a 3 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10. Arizona is one of those 5. They got a 4 out of 10. Is tied for the second worst coaching staff in the NFL. In terms of the NFC, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers and the Atlanta Falcons also got a 4 out of 10 on coaching, but how it works with the rating system is it goes to a 70 to 80 scale. So a 0 out of 10 would be a 70, a 1 being a 71, and a 10 being an 80 out of 80. So the Cardinals get a 74 out of 80 for coaching. Jonathan Gannon is someone who I would have been fine with as a hire if the Super Bowl didn't happen. I was high on Jonathan Gannon being a head coach going into this offseason, and then the Super Bowl happened where the defense got absolutely exposed. Jonathan Gannon got absolutely exposed. I understand it was the Kansas City Chiefs, but the play calls were atrocious on defense. So Jonathan Gannon, I was not a big fan of the hire after the Super Bowl, and he's a fantastic defensive coordinator, don't get me wrong, but you're now matching him up with the second worst defense, and the play calls weren't great against a creative offense. I'm not sure how this is all going to translate together. And then the coordinators are good-ish. Drew Petzing is where it starts. Offensive coordinator, and I just don't think the resume is worth getting that offensive coordinator position, especially when you note that the offense is the best part of the team. Drew Petzing, if you don't know who he is, he started as the Vikings wide receiver coach. He was the main developer of Diggs and Adam Thielen as well. That's a solid piece of the resume. But it didn't get any better. He left Minnesota to join Cleveland, where he became the tight ends coach. And right after he became the quarterbacks coach in 2022, David Njoku had a breakout year. And then as a quarterbacks coach, he worked with Deshaun Watson, and Watson easily had the worst season of his career. So because of that, Petzing doesn't really have the best resume to be offensive coordinator. It's not terrible, but it could have been much better. And I did actually like the hiring of Nick Rallis for defensive coordinator. He was the Vikings defensive quality control coach, and after he departed with Minnesota, that defense started rapidly declining. And then he became the linebackers coach for Philly in 2021 and 2022. He helped develop the likes of Hassan Reddick, TJ Edwards, Kaiser White, who's on the Arizona Cardinals, and then Alex Singleton as well. He developed all of those guys. And of course, he's got that Jonathan Gannon connection. And Rallis has quickly went through the steps of becoming a defensive coordinator, so he's easily on the rise here. So overall, you have a very inexperienced top 3, and I only liked one of those 3 hires. So all 3 of them are new to how high they've been career-wise. Jonathan Gannon is a C+, Drew Petzing is a C, and Nick Rallis is a B+. That rounds out to a 4 out of 10 or a 74 out of 10. Becomes the second best thing about this team, but 28% of the rating is coaching, and that's a 74, which is just okay. But 28% is the coaching, and a 4 out of 10 or a 74 is not great. It could have been much better, especially when you note that there are 7 staffs that had 80 out of 80. So a 74 for the Arizona Cardinals coaching wraps up up this video-ish. I want to summarize one more time why the Arizona Cardinals got here to 31st. The offense is 75.47, 18th in the league, 8th in the NFC, 2nd in the NFC West behind San Francisco. The defense and special teams are both second to worst, ahead of LA Rams. Defense got a 68.82 and special teams got a 68.42. And coaching was also the second worst in the league, except this was a big tie with a bunch of other teams. It's tied for 14th and last in the NFC, which is ATL and Tampa Bay are the two that are there at a 74 as well, and they're 4th in the NFC West as well. So all of this wraps up to a 72.2, which is 30% of 75.47, 26% of 68.82, 16% of 68.42, and 28% of 74. That rounds out to a 72.2, 31st in the NFL. So that wraps up the video, you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I hope you did enjoy. Please make sure to leave a like on it and comment your opinions on the Arizona Cardinals for this upcoming season. If you did enjoy, of course, subscribe to the channel. I still have 30 more teams to power rank for you guys and go deep into, so if you did enjoy this content, subscribe to the channel. It doesn't take you long to do so. But once again, I'm Chase Keller from Chase Keller Journalism, and thank you guys so much for choosing this channel as your source of sports coverage. I'll see you guys in the next video.